Good afternoon, everybody. This is Chris Gabrelchik with Hot Shot Secret, and I'm here with Eric. He's one of our account executives. And today we're going to talk about the Diesel Extreme, but we're also going to talk about where our teams are this week. We have an NHRDA Big Sky Truck Fest in Montana at the Yellowstone Drag Strip. We also have, with the Outlaw Diesel Super Series in Terre Haute, Indiana, we've got a team there, the Shy Diesel Extravaganza. And we have a Street Outlaw event in West Virginia. I believe that's their season finale. Mm-hmm. So we've got Kyle down there. He was here last week. He's down there this week with them. And then the Great American Trucking Show in Dallas. So if you're a truck driver and you're in Dallas, go to the GAT show. It's not nearly as big as the MAT show in Louisville, but you do get a lot more attention from the vendors because they have a lot more time to spend with you. If all works out, we're going to send a live stream to some of the people out at the races and see how that looks, but we're not sure if that's going to come together quite right. So this week at LSI and at Hot Shot Secret, we did a test with a couple of additives at Fire Pump Diesel. One of the things that we tested was the catalyst in the fuels. There's a lot of different catalysts that we can use in fuels that supposedly make them burn better. Here at LSI, we get a lot of people that bring products in. They want us to test them, or they claim to have the best and the latest. But before we use anything, we test it extensively, just to see what works and what doesn't, then index it. This one worked better than this one didn't work at all. Unfortunately, this week, the catalyst we used in the fuel didn't work at all. So we see no gains, and we don't know if there was some other area that we could use it. We didn't, write it off completely, but for the most part, we didn't see any gains on that.
Chris, on that point, it's a race fuel application. That's kind of the objective for that. So we're still working on that.
That's right. We didn't check it for fuel economy. It was a racing application. We're trying to increase the efficacy of our racing fuels because we know that's a big industry out there, especially with all the people that are racing these days on the diesel circuit. But the catalyst didn't seem to work on the race fuel. So then we tried it's a new additive that works in engine oils to see if that would work. And again, so good. So, we get the wins, we get the losses, but either way, we only bring to you what are the wins. And when we do, there's been a lot of testing behind it, and you can be assured that it's going to do what we say it's going to do because we've tested it extensively. So this week, we want to talk about Diesel Extreme. Our first product on the market was our Stiction Eliminator. And it was such a big hit that the retailers asked us to come up with a different product to add to it for the diesel side. Well, at the time, we literally just had one product. And the goal was to create a product that fixed a problem in the market. With the Diesel Extreme at that time, they had just taken the sulfur out of the fuel. And so we have what's called ultra-low sulfur fuel now, and everybody's used to that. But at the time, all the refiners and the terminals started putting lubricants in the fuel to try to make up for the lubricity that we lost with the sulfur. The problem was that a lot of them were incompatible, and they left this film on the inside of the fuel system called IDID, internal diesel injector deposits. Now, the problem with IDIDs is that they are extremely tough to get rid of. There are only two chemistries that we could ever find that remove these IDIDs, and nothing else works. So if you had gone to the shelf, if you had this problem, it would have looked like a dark brown varnish on the inside of your injectors. And if you went to the shelf and grabbed every additive on the shelf and dumped it in there, not one of them would have affected it because it wasn't like varnish like we're used to. It wasn't hydrocarbon. This was an incompatibility with additives. So it required a very special chemistry. So we started that as our base. And then we thought about what other problems would a truck driver have with a fuel? Because, again, the goal was we wanted you to be able to put something in there that would fix it every time, or at least 9 times out of 10, or if it didn't fix it, you knew there was something else significantly wrong. So the next step was I looked at the moisture in diesel fuel. I don't know if everybody knows this, but diesel fuel can have up to 1% moisture in it. That's just normal. When it cools down at night, that moisture drops down to the bottom of the tank with the bottom of your lines, and it leaves a little tiny corrosion spot. Now, we're not talking about half a gallon or a quart. We're talking about droplets or teaspoons of water. But when they sit in the same spot, like in a fuel line, every time, day after day, it eventually starts to corrode and rust. So the first step was to get rid of that moisture. So we used the strongest moisture dispersant that we can get. called a glycol-based moisture dispersant. And that pulls moisture up and disperses it throughout the fuel. So that was step one. Now we've got a spot inside the fuel system that started to corrode. Rust or corrode. If it's steel, it's gonna rust. But we wanted to seal that off, so we put a rust and corrosion inhibitor in there. And what this does is seal it off like spraying WD-40 on a piece of rusty metal. So that was step two. So we want to fix the water, then fix the corrosion, fix the IDs. So the next piece of this puzzle was, well, we wanted faster ignition and we wanted better fuel economy. So we wanted to triple up on the amount of detergent in there. We wanted to clean out the whole fuel system, not just the injector tip, but the tank, the lines, everything. So we put the maximum amount of detergent that could possibly be put in there. As a matter of fact, in some countries, there was so much that they said we had to dilute it 3-to-1 just to sell it in those countries. That's how strong it was. And then after we got to that point, we wanted to put a lot of cetane booster in there, because cetane doesn't only give you power, but it also helps you start your truck faster. Especially in the wintertime, that's really important to have a high cetane level. So we really put as much cetane as we could possibly put in there. Cetane is ethyl hexylnitrate. The problem with cetane is if it gets too much of it, it can explode. So we were limited on how much we could put. We didn't want trucks exploding. That would be bad. After that, we went through the process of what a diesel engine may go through. So one of the things that came up was, if I have a tractor and I park it and it sits in the barn for 6 months, is it going to start? Well, diesel fuel does polymerize. It goes bad. After about 60 days, it starts to degrade. And then it starts to leave that yellow varnish behind. So we put a fuel stabilizer in there with the intent of being able to keep that fuel fresh for 2 years. So again, the goal here was to make the strongest, most potent additive that money could buy, not to try to compete with everything else on the shelf where they're trying to just give you the basics. We wanted to give you everything you would need to do the job properly. And that's how we came up with the Diesel Extreme.
Yeah. I mean, just to recap, so one, strong cetane boost. It's going to help you in multiple ways. Injector cleaner, water dispersant, lubricity, fuel stabilizer. So it's really everything you need for the fuel system. And one area I think, Chris, that is really important is IDID. So I just want to double back to that really quick. When you think about injectors, they're hard to maintain and they're not cheap to fix. So an injector, when we're talking about clearances, maybe 5 microns, right, is how much room there is on these injectors. So to give you an example of what that's like, the human eye can't see anything below 30 microns, right, roughly. So we're talking a really tiny space. So any kind of varnish or deposits that's going to build up, it's going to cause a lot of problems for the injectors. And the reason why, one of the reasons that makes this product unique to some of the others out there on the shelf is this will not only remove IDIDs, but also clean the tip of the injectors. A lot of products out there were only going to focus on the tip of the injectors, clean off those so you get a proper spray pattern. But IDIDs is extremely important to get cleaned out. So that's another unique.
I forgot to introduce Eric. The reason I asked Eric to be on here is he answers a lot of the customer service calls coming in. So he really does have, his thumb on the beat of what's happening. So I don't get to answer those calls anymore because they have me doing other things. But that brings up a good point. Cleaning the tip of the injector is not that hard to do because you have so much fuel going through the tip. You don't need a lot of detergent to do that. Trying to clean up everything inside the tank when that fuel's been dispersed out over such a big area is a much harder task. So there is a lot more detergent in there to accomplish that. So it's a really important thing. And if you're wondering, is the fuel additive that you're using now, does that clean IDIDs? The answer to that is just look on the bottle. It's an expensive package. It's a very expensive component to add to the additive. If they are using it, it will be in there. It will tell you point blank, this cleans up IDIDs. So that's one point of differentiation. Another thing, we're talking about what the product does. Those are called features. What does this mean to you as a consumer? Or as somebody that owns a piece of diesel equipment? It means you're going to get faster starts. It means you're going to get more horsepower, about 5 to 10% more horsepower. And that's been proven in dyno after dyno after dyno. We've even done an EPA test to show that result is there. You're going to get more fuel economy. So what's happening is we're treating that engine in two ways, and all additives do this to some degree. There's two things we're trying to affect change on. One is cleaning up the system so it's running like it should. So that gives us an efficiency gain. The second efficiency gain is changing that fuel chemically so that it burns cleaner. If you think about it, you see black smoke coming out of a diesel engine, which if you got a DPF system, you don't see that. But on an older system, you can get the idea. What we're doing is taking part of what used to be sent out the exhaust system and we're burning it, creating energy with it. So we're taking what was a loss and now it's a gain. So that's where we get the increase in fuel economy. Anytime you get an increase in horsepower, you're almost always getting an increase in fuel economy, dollar for dollar. So we can see both of those happening. And you're getting a cleaner system, a longer life to your lubricants. Oh, that's another thing we didn't mention, lubricity additive.
Yeah.
We put lubricity additive in there. The amount of lubricity we put in was based on trying to bring your fuel back to where it was when you had high sulfur fuel. So we wanted enough in there that it was as good as fuel 20 years ago. The problem, we could put more in, and we may come out with a formula in the future just for that, because some people have asked us for that. But the problem comes in, at some point you have to start giving up something for something else. There's one thing different about the way we do things at Lubrication Specialties. We don't put fillers in our product. We do have to put some carriers to make things disperse. In other words, if you put a detergent, it might not want to mix with fuel. So we might put cetane booster in there. But a lot of companies will put, say, 1 ounce of additive in and then 31 ounces of a kerosene type product or a solvent type thing. We don't do that. I mean, it's all 100% active ingredients. So the problem comes, okay, if you want more lubricity, then you've got to give up cetane, or if you want more lubricity, you have to give up detergent. So we try to balance it out and decide what's the highest value for you, the customer, and we think we've got the perfect solution here with what we're doing.
And just to touch on lubricity, especially owner operators out there are going to know this. Fuel quality is going to vary greatly throughout the country, wherever you are. So some places you may get decent quality fuel, other places not so great. So the great thing about the lubricity that we have in our fuel additives is, say, for example, you're in a position where you're not getting the greatest quality fuel, and the lubricity is not where the engine manufacturers need it to be to protect the engine. Well, there's enough lubricity enhancer in our fuel additives that'll put you back in the spec where the engine manufacturers need it to be to protect your different components. So we could go on all day about the importance of the different features here, but that's just
it's a good point. When he's talking about the difference in fuel quality, if you're looking at what the EPA mandates for gasoline, the spec is like this type. So even state by state, the specifications change, which is why we have such a huge fluctuation in gasoline prices. California's mandate is much different than Ohio's, and it's much different than Texas. So it's almost like a custom blend for every state. Diesel fuel, on the other hand, it's more like this. I mean, it's huge. So we have tested thousands and thousands of tests of diesel fuel because we've been doing this for 30 years on the diesel fuel side. And we have found chromium, we have found lead, we have found every chemical, antimony. There was one time we were having a problem down in Kentucky and we couldn't figure it out, so we sent it in for an analysis. We found antimony in there and lead, chromium, trying to think of some of the other ones, but we were all baffled by it. And then when we went and talked to the refinery, they said that a lot of times when they're pushing product through the hose, they're using, through the pipeline, they could be using diesel fuel, and that just gets washed in with the diesel. And because the spec is so large, that allows them to get rid of a lot of stuff that they don't need. So the take home for the average diesel user is, I can't trust the fuel that I'm buying. It could be in spec, but that doesn't make it good. I mean, it's just, it's like saying that the spec for cholesterol is 500. Well, that don't make it good. You're going to have a heart attack. It just means that they made the spec really, really large. But the Diesel Extreme is made to bring all of those up to par, and it's always a good go-to. Before you start changing everything and switching everything out, try a bottle of it. It usually fixes it. We've got a really good track record with that product. So that's the rundown. If you have any questions on the Diesel Extreme, we'd encourage you to post them on here. We've got Levi in the background there looking for questions. We also have an 800 number set up with Claire at the front office answering. It's 1-800-341-6516. And she can patch you right through and we can answer your call live on Facebook. It's 1-800-341-6516. Anybody, we have anything new from the races going on here? Nobody tapped in yet? So we have a couple questions that we have pulled in over the last few weeks. It says, just curious if stiction eliminator will do harm to the engine if I use it on a gasoline engine. And this was somebody with a 2015 Honda Civic. Stiction eliminator will not do harm in a gasoline engine. It has a higher value in diesel engines because diesel engines tend to gunk up more. Just at 100,000 miles, if you pull a diesel engine apart, it looks dirtier than a gas engine because diesel is a dirtier burning fuel. But it does have a value in gasoline engines in that it cleans them up, but especially if you have a turbocharger. Turbos tend to want to shear the oil and leave behind a residue, and stiction eliminator is the only product that we've ever found that can do that job well and safely. Do you have anything to add to that, Eric?
Well, yeah, there's the misconception that stiction is strictly a diesel engine problem, but it's going to happen in really any engine, diesel, gas. It's a byproduct of high temperatures, a lot of pressure, stiction is going to occur. So gas engine, yeah, it's definitely going to be beneficial.
One of the other questions that we get a lot, can I add stiction eliminator and FR3 friction reducer at the same time? If not, which one would you recommend? Not currently having any problems, but have never added any additives, and I'm interested in better fuel mileage, better performance, and general better maintenance. This is a 2014 Ram 2500. You don't need to add both products. The stiction eliminator is formulated with FR3 in it, so you just need one or the other. And since it's a 4-year-old truck, my go-to would be use a stiction eliminator first, clean everything out, and then the next oil change, put the FR3 in. This isn't an exact science, but usually the longer you've had a truck, the more miles that are on it, the more buildup you're going to get. So cleaning first is always a good deal, before you start treating the engine. The FR3 does have cleaning, it does have cleaning properties, but the stiction eliminator will do it better. So, FR3 can go in anytime, even, somebody that's got 10,000 miles, 20,000 miles. That product is made for all engines. It could be used in a gas engine or a diesel engine. If you really want to, if you have any problems with power steering pumps, I've used in a lot of power steering systems. It really helps those out, especially if they're squealing. It's crazy how well it works. So feel free to try that. Eric, do you have anything to add to that?
No, the biggest thing I always try to explain to people is preventative maintenance with both of these products, but FR3 especially. If you got a newer vehicle, you're still 30, 40,000 miles, you got a long ways to go. FR3 is one that's going to reduce wear greatly.
Yeah, by 43%.
43%. So just for longevity purposes, it's well worth it for sure.
The FR3 got a 3% increase in horsepower on one of LeBron's trucks. We have seen the fire pump diesel. I'm sorry, and we have seen we run tests all the time here, and we have seen a consistent 5% increase in fuel economy using FR3. It's a very economical way to treat the engine and keep it running right. But reducing your wear by 40% essentially means that the engine's going to last twice as long, which is really exciting. So we have another caller here that asked about excessive blow-by and using oil. This is a 2008 Ford F-250. So this would be 10-year-old truck, doesn't say how many miles, but excessive blow-by. Our go-to, in that case, I would use what we call our diesel duo, the stiction eliminator plus the diesel extreme. And this is my logic behind it. The stiction eliminator is going to clean up all the buildup on the oil side. You can imagine the rings on the outside of the piston, they're kind of like squeegees going up and down the cylinder walls. So as they get hot, because one side of it's on the combustion side, so there's, the piston goes up, there's an explosion that pushes it down. Well, obviously, if there's an explosion, there's a lot of heat. I mean, that's the hottest spot in the entire engine. So any oil that's on the other side of that is going to have a tendency to cook or coke up. and it's going to be on both sides of the ring. Both sides of that squeegee are getting buildup. One's from the fuel, the other one's from the oil. On the oil side, the stiction eliminator will loosen that up and cause it to melt away so that those rings start moving. The problem is that those rings are in little grooves, and anybody that's a mechanic knows exactly what I'm talking about. And their job is to move in and out. You look at a cylinder and it looks perfectly straight, but it's not. I mean, it actually has got grooves in it, and those little squeegees are made to move up and down and in and out so that they keep it clean. On the fuel side, you're getting caked up and coked up carbon on that side, and to clean that up, you need a really, really strong formula, and that's what the Diesel Extreme is made to do. So if we can break those free and melt those away through the combustion chamber, all of a sudden those rings are working better and they're stopping the blow-by. Now, one of the unfortunate things with blow-by, especially after that many miles and that many years, it's going to take some time. You only need one treatment of stiction eliminator, but you'll probably need 2 or 3 treatments of Diesel Extreme, because it's a real, if you ever take one apart, it's hard carbon. I mean, it's really hard. And we're not, on the oil side, we're able to kind of soak it with product because it's always coated in oil. So it has more opportunity to melt it away. Where on the fuel side, you're like in a, it's exploding all the time. So you don't really have that opportunity. But it's a little bit harder to remove, but it does work. And we've got a lot of good feedback from that.
And one way to tell if you have excessive blow-by, well, especially diesels. Every diesel is going to have a little bit of blow-by. Mm-hmm. But one good way to tell is you can take the oil cap off, turn it upside down, and put it back. If it blows off, it's excessive. So it may be a good idea to try to get that cleaned up.
If you like that, those are good hometown ways to check things. So what Eric's saying is that if you've got blow-by, you're building up pressure on the oil side of your system. So the cap usually fits in there pretty tight. If you take it off and put it upside down, if there's pressure, like if the combustion chamber is blowing pressure back, it's going to pop that cap off. I mean, it's not safe to do, but you could put your hand on there and feel it. But we don't want to tell you to do that, because sure enough, somebody will get their hand cut off and blame us for it. So put the cap on there upside down. If it blows it off, you'll know that you're getting blow-by. Okay, we've got one here. This is a 2006 Ford Superduty. So that would be a 6.0 liter engine. It says, I have 3 bad injectors. They say one is gone, one's at 50%, one's at 75%. Can I use stiction eliminator? And will this oil, he's asking if he can use it with Lucas, and then how much does he use? We wouldn't recommend using it with Lucas. I don't think anything detrimental is going to happen, but we've never tested it. We don't know. We would prefer, it's easier just to use the one product. Normally, especially when we first started selling it, we used to say, if you use this, use this before you turn a wrench. That was our early on marketing, advanced marketing 101. And the idea was, myself included, anybody out there that has an engine, something's wrong. All of a sudden something's ticking, it doesn't run right, it's not starting right. Do you start taking parts off and replacing things? Well, I say try this first. If it fixes it, then you don't have to do any of that. It's way better. So they've got one bad injector, one at 50%, and one at 75%. There's probably a 99% chance that stiction eliminator will fix all 3 of those injectors after 500 to 1,000 miles. And that's not just us saying that. Navistar tested it. We've tested it for, I pulled the numbers the other day. It's close to 500,000 bottles sold. So we have hundreds of thousands of people that have tried this and it's worked. In those types of injectors, if you've got a Huey system, a DT466, any international engine, this is going to fix your, if somebody that has one of those engines, they should be using this product not only to clean out the engine, but also to keep it clean as time goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing is, I think we mentioned this last time, and we have it all over our website. If it doesn't fix the problem, we have a money-back guarantee. So if it doesn't fix the problem, you have something much worse than stiction. So we'll gladly refund your money and let you figure it out.
Yeah, and I always forget to mention that because it's just part of our life here. But we do guarantee everything 100%. So if you have a problem, don't be shy about it. Just let us know. We'll refund your money. Most of the time, people want to know, what can I do next, or is it worth? We'll send you another bottle at no charge if you prefer that instead of getting your money back. And a lot of people do. They say, I really just want my truck to run. The $50 isn't what I'm after. I don't want to spend $3,000. And sometimes it does take a second bottle. We had a driver that had 280,000 miles on a Ford 6-liter engine with the original injectors. I'm telling you, there's not that many people that can say that. When we first started blending the product, we were getting a lot of calls of people that were replacing injectors every 50,000 miles, literally every 50, and they were upset. I mean, they were really upset, saying this isn't right. I spent $60,000 on this truck, and I'm replacing injectors every 50,000 miles. It's just not right. Okay, we got a 2017 Ram 1500. Sluggish throttle response at startup before the engine's warm. I'm just curious as to whether or not stiction eliminator is safe to use on my truck. It doesn't say whether it's a gas or diesel, so I'm assuming it's a diesel.
Not sure.
So, yes, the stiction eliminator would help. So would the diesel extreme. In this case, what we got to decide is, or what we don't know, because we don't have, like a microscope inside the engine to see where the problem's coming from. It's coming from the fuel side or the oil side. Even though the Ram doesn't have a HUE system, it does have places for varnish to build up. The turbocharger, on the cams. There's other areas where it builds up, and we've had so many people tell us that it's helped that we go ahead and recommend it. The fuel side is the biggest area that we can impact change with the diesel extreme. One treatment, it cleans out everything from the fuel tank all the way to the fuel injectors and gives you a lot more throttle response and makes it run like brand new. Again, that two-sided thing. One is we're cleaning everything up, making it like brand new. The second thing is we're chemically treating the fuel so that it burns better. So is there any other questions out there? Levi, has anything come through? He's pointing to you, Eric.
I'm not seeing anything.
Levi, why don't you just go ahead and tell us what it is?
Somebody wants to know the thoughts on biodiesel.
Okay, biodiesel, that's a good question. Great question. Biodiesel is not as bad as everybody wants it to be. You have to look at the pros and the cons. The one thing about biodiesel is it's a great lubricity additive. 5% of biodiesel is way more than any additive will ever give you as far as lubricity. The bad thing about biodiesel is it's what they call hydrolytic, which it's an ester. So I'm trying to think of how to unfold this, not to bore everybody to death. Yeah. But in essence, what happens is esters, when they're hydrolytic, they want to absorb moisture right from the air. So if we had a cup of straight diesel fuel and a cup of straight biodiesel here and left them sit for a year, this one would say 0% moisture. This one would be probably 5% moisture. So it literally just pulls it in from the air. So the problem there is that biodiesels inherently are prone to have more moisture, and it pulls it into your system. And the other thing is, because they are a biodegradable product, they're more prone to bacteria. So there's a better chance that you'll get bacterial growth in the system. So if it was my truck, if I'm turning it a lot, I would not fear biodiesel. If I'm parking it a lot, I would not use biodiesel. I would try to avoid it if I could, or use a really good additive. Now, when you get a bacterial infection in your fuel system, and that usually looks kind of like black and slimy stuff on your filter, there's two ways to kill that. One is to use a biocide, which is really dangerous because it's made to kill living organisms. We have it, and we sell it, and we do use it. We don't put it in any of these products because it's an EPA-regulated product, and you just don't want it everywhere. The other way is to starve it to death. So one way you're going to poison it, and the other way you're going to starve it. If you keep all the moisture out of the system, the bacteria can't grow. It lives off of moisture, H2O, and hydrocarbons. So it's the same kind of bacteria. If anybody's ever worked in a metalworking shop, it grows on the film between the coolant and the oil, what they call tramp oil, which is what comes off of the lathe. In that interface, that distance between them, this bacteria grows. And usually on Monday morning when you start up the equipment, it smells like sulfur. And that's because that's what it poops out, the sulfur. The bacteria eats hydrocarbon and water and it poops out sulfur. It smells terrible. So if you keep the water out of your system, if you're going to use biodiesel, keep the water out. If you're going to have to let it sit and you have to use biodiesel, try to put some sort of biocide in there. Any other questions there, Levi? Okay, it looks like we've got a great podcast or live cast.
Live stream.
Live stream. We got to get the name down. I want to thank Eric for being with us this week. We answered a lot of questions. Post your questions this week. We will be glad to answer them next week. We'll probably dive into the FR3 and how we tested it, why we tested it, and just try to give you some idea how it's different from the Stiction Eliminator and why we went ahead and built it out in the first place. So everybody out there, have a great weekend. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next week.
And stay tuned. Kyle's going live.
Yeah, so
Street Outlaws.
shortly after this, we'll be live from West Virginia with the Street Outlaws finale. So stay tuned and check that out.
Yeah, watch our next one.